I didn't lose her in one moment. I lost her slowly, in the spaces between words, in the silences we stopped trying to fill. The evenings were our ritual. The kind that didn't need planning, didn't need words, they just happened. She would sit by the window, cross-legged, a book resting loosely in her lap. The soft amber light from the old lamp beside her haloed her hair, turning every strand into gold. I used to think there was nothing more peaceful than that sight, her lost in her own quiet world, the faint trace of jasmine tea drifting through the air, the city murmuring outside our window. I'd sit at the small dining table pretending to work, but really, I was watching her. I liked the way she turned a page, slow, deliberate, as if savoring each word before letting it go. Every now and then, she'd glance up and catch me looking. She'd smile that knowing smile, gentle, amused, the one that said she saw right through me, and I'd feel that familiar rush of warmth in my chest. Back then, everything felt effortless. We talked about everything and nothing, music, the neighbors, the weather that never seemed to decide what it wanted to be. She'd tease me about my clumsy cooking, and I'd laugh, pretending not to care that she was always right. The laughter came easily, like air, like something we'd never run out of. But lately, it's quieter. The same lamp still glows, the same tea still steams, but something invisible has shifted. She still reads by the window, but her smile doesn't come as easily. I still pretend to work, but I find myself typing the same sentence 3 times, not really seeing the words. There's a space between us, not physical, but something deeper. A silence that used to feel comfortable now hums with questions neither of us dares to ask. It's strange how love can stay, yet feel like it's slipping through your hands. You don't even notice it at first. It's in the small things, how long it takes her to answer a question, how often I check my phone instead of looking at her. The warmth hasn't vanished, it's just thinner, like the last light before evening turns to night. One evening, she closes her book and looks at me for a long moment. There's something in her eyes, not anger, not sadness exactly, but distance. Like she's already somewhere else in her mind. I smile, hoping she'll come back, but she just nods softly, and returns to her reading. And that's when I feel it, the quiet truth that we've stopped reaching for each other. I still love her deeply. But it feels like loving someone through a fog. I can see her, I can hear her voice, but I can't quite touch her anymore. That night, as she drifts to sleep beside me, I lie awake, staring at the ceiling, tracing the outline of her breath in the dark. I tell myself this is just a phase. That every relationship has seasons. That what we have is too real to fade. But somewhere deep down, in a place I don't want to admit exists, I already know, something beautiful is quietly changing, and I don't yet know how to stop it. It started with nothing. No fight, no harsh words, just nothing. A quiet that stretched a little too long, a moment that lingered just a bit too still. We were sitting on the couch one rainy afternoon. The kind of day that used to draw us closer, a blanket, a movie, her head on my shoulder. But that day, the rain felt heavier, the room colder. She sat on one end, her legs curled under her, phone in hand, eyes flickering with the glow of messages I couldn't see. I wanted to ask what she was reading. I wanted to say something, anything, to bridge the space between us. But the words stuck in my throat. It felt safer to stay quiet, to pretend I didn't notice how far away she suddenly seemed. Outside, the rain traced slow, trembling lines down the window. Inside, the only sound was the faint rhythm of her breathing. Every few seconds she'd sigh, not loud enough to mean frustration, but soft enough to sound like longing. I watched her fingers brush a strand of hair from her face. I'd seen that gesture 1,000 times before, but today it felt different. Distant. Practiced. As if she was already learning how to live without me. I looked down at my hands, resting on my knees, still, unsure, foreign. Once, she used to reach for them without thinking. Now, they just waited. I tried to break the silence. Want to go for a walk? I asked, my voice quiet, almost hesitant. She glanced up, polite but distracted. It's raining, she said softly. And then, She smiled, small and tired, the kind of smile you give when you're being kind, not when you're being close. So I nodded, and we both turned back to the space between us. The movie played on, a love story, ironically, but I couldn't follow the plot. My thoughts were too loud. I wanted her to laugh at something, to make a joke, to nudge my arm the way she used to. I waited for it, like waiting for a spark that would never come. At one point, she shifted closer, just slightly. My heart jumped, stupidly hopeful. But she was only reaching for the blanket. Her hand brushed mine, a fleeting touch, skin against skin, and for a split second, I felt everything rush back. All the warmth, the closeness, the ease. But just as quickly it was gone. She drew her hand away. I pretended not to notice. That's how it happens. Love doesn't always leave with slammed doors or shouted words. Sometimes it just fades. Quietly. Gracefully. Like light dimming at dusk. That night, we didn't talk much before bed. She turned off the lamp, rolled onto her side, her back to me. I reached out, almost, then stopped. I told myself she was tired, that tomorrow would be different. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, I realized something painful. It wasn't that we had nothing left to say. It was that neither of us knew how to begin anymore. It didn't happen on a special day. No anniversary, no argument waiting to explode. Just an ordinary Thursday, the kind that starts with coffee and ends with questions you can never unask. She was in the kitchen when it began. The window was open, letting in the sound of passing cars and the smell of rain-soaked pavement. I was standing by the counter, pretending to look for something in the cupboard. We hadn't spoken much all morning, small talk, half smiles, the same fragile politeness that had started to fill our days. Then she said it? Quietly. "Are you happy?" I turned, unsure if I'd heard her right. The question was simple, but her tone wasn't. It carried years of weight, the kind that doesn't belong to one moment but to many. "I think so," I said, though even I didn't believe the sound of my own voice. She nodded, eyes still fixed on the cup in her hands. "I've been wondering," she whispered, "if we're still us." There it was, the truth, small but devastating. Not shouted, not angry, just real. The air between us thickened. I could hear the hum of the fridge, the drip of the tap, my own heartbeat louder than both. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time in months, I saw the exhaustion behind her calm. "I don't feel like we see each other anymore," she said. "We talk, but it's like we're reading from an old script. You laugh at the same lines. I play the same part. But it doesn't feel alive anymore." I wanted to argue. To tell her she was wrong. That love goes through seasons, that we just needed time. But my throat closed around the words. Deep down, I knew she was right. So I said nothing. She set her cup down and crossed her arms, not defensively, but as if holding herself together. Her voice softened. "I've been trying," she said. "God knows I've tried. But somewhere along the way, I stopped feeling like myself around you. And I think, maybe you did too." I looked at her, the woman who once felt like home, and felt something crack quietly inside me. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cruel. She was just tired. Tired of pretending that the quiet between us was peace instead of absence. "I don't want to hurt you," she said. "But I can't keep loving a version of us that doesn't exist anymore." That line stayed with me. I can't keep loving a version of us that doesn't exist anymore. I wanted to reach for her, to take her hand, to promise we could find our way back. But the truth had already settled in the room like dust, visible, undeniable. She walked past me then, brushing my arm gently as she did. That touch, soft, hesitant, felt like both an ending and a mercy. And as the door closed behind her, the silence that followed was no longer empty. It was full of every truth we'd been too afraid to speak until now. That night, the apartment felt larger than it ever had before. It wasn't just the absence of her voice, it was the space it left behind. Every sound seemed sharper: the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, the creak of the wooden floor when I moved. I sat on the edge of the bed, still hearing her words replaying in my head. I can't keep loving a version of us that doesn't exist anymore. It wasn't cruel. It was honest, and that's what hurt the most. The lamp by the bed cast a weak golden light across the room, just enough to catch the outline of her sweater draped over the chair. It still smelled faintly of her perfume, soft, familiar, grounding. I reached out, fingertips brushing the fabric, and for a second it almost felt like she was still here, moving around the room, humming some song under her breath the way she used to. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried that quiet heaviness that follows a storm. I tried closing my eyes, but the memories wouldn't let me rest. I saw her the way she used to laugh, head tilted slightly, eyes closing just before the sound escaped her lips. I remembered the way she'd reach for me when she was half asleep, her hand searching until it found mine. Those small, wordless gestures that said more than "I love you" ever could. And I remembered our beginning, the night we first met. I'd spilled coffee on her book in a crowded cafe. She looked up at me with mild annoyance, then smiled, that kind of smile that made you want to be better. We spent hours talking after that, long after the shop had closed. I remember thinking she was someone who made ordinary moments feel important. But somewhere along the way, I stopped noticing the small things that once drew me to her. Maybe I got too comfortable. Maybe I mistook familiarity for closeness. It's strange how easy it is to love someone, and how quietly that love can fade when you stop tending to it. I turned to her side of the bed. The pillow still held the faint impression of her head, the scent of her shampoo, subtle, floral, and possibly human. I pressed my hand there, feeling the emptiness beneath the fabric, and it hit me, she wasn't coming back tonight. Maybe not at all. The clock read 2:17 a.m. The city outside was asleep, but my mind was wide awake, wandering through moments that would never happen again. If I could have spoken to her right then, I would have told her I finally understood. That I saw how lonely she must have felt even while I was right beside her. That the silence between us wasn't her fault, it was mine too. But instead I just lay there, listening to the echo of a love that was already beginning to turn into memory. And as dawn began to creep through the curtains, I realized something I never wanted to face: she hadn't stopped loving me out of anger. She'd stopped because she was brave enough to face the truth, and I was only just learning how to. Days passed in fragments, the kind that don't fit neatly together anymore. I went through the motions: work, errands, conversations that meant nothing. But every quiet moment between those tasks led back to her. The way she looked at me that last time, calm, resolute, it replayed in my mind like a scene I couldn't stop rewinding. I told myself I'd give her space. That maybe distance would bring perspective, maybe even hope. But the truth followed me, in the shape of our apartment, in the silence that filled it, in the ghost of her laughter that still seemed to live in the corners of the room. One afternoon, I walked to the park where we used to go in spring. The air was cooler now, the kind of chill that brushes your skin without asking. The trees had started to shed their color, leaves scattered like quiet confessions on the path. That's where I saw her. She was sitting on the same bench we once shared, the one near the fountain, where we'd watched kids chase pigeons and talked about everything from travel to fears we never admitted to anyone else. She was wearing a gray coat, her hair tucked neatly behind her ear, her hands clasped in her lap. When she looked up and saw me, she didn't seem surprised, just softly aware, like she'd expected I might come. "Hey," I said, my voice low, unsure. She smiled faintly. "Hey." I sat down beside her, leaving just enough space for comfort, not distance. For a while, we didn't speak. The sound of water filled the air, rhythmic, unhurried. She looked ahead, not at me, and said quietly, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I shook my head. "You didn't." And for the first time, I meant it. She turned then, eyes glistening in the soft gray light. "I just couldn't keep pretending we were okay. I needed to find something that felt honest again." There was no bitterness in her voice, just truth. And it hit me that this was what love sometimes looked like, not holding tighter, but letting go with grace. I know, I said, the words catching in my throat. I think I was scared to admit it. That maybe I wasn't enough for you anymore. She reached out, her hand finding mine. The touch was warm, familiar, steady. She held it for a moment, her thumb brushing lightly over my knuckles, the way she used to when she was trying to comfort me. You were enough, she said softly. We just stopped being right for each other. A breeze passed through the trees, sending a few leaves swirling between us. Her hand lingered a moment longer, then slipped away. And somehow, that small act, that letting go, felt like forgiveness. We talked for a while longer, about nothing important, just memories, gentle laughter, fragments of a life that once fit perfectly. Then she stood, adjusting her coat. Take care of yourself, she said and smiled. As she walked away, the truth settled in my chest, heavy, but clean. Some endings aren't failures. They're just moments when love changes shape, asking to be remembered instead of repaired. And for the first time, I didn't fight it. I just let her go, and let the wind carry what remained. It was late afternoon when we decided to meet one last time. No big talk, no plan, just a quiet understanding that we needed to close this chapter face to face. The air had that golden softness only autumn gives, where every sound feels gentler, like the world itself is trying to make peace with change. She waited for me near the train station, leaning against the railing, the wind tugging lightly at her coat. When she saw me, she smiled, not the bright, playful one from before, but something softer, wiser. I noticed she looked tired, though not in a way that begged for rest. More like someone who had finally set something down after carrying it for too long. Hey, I said, stopping a few feet away. Hey, she echoed, her voice calm, steady. For a while, we just stood there, watching people come and go, strangers rushing past us, their lives untouched by ours. It felt strange, how the world could move on so easily while we stood still, on the edge of something ending. I'm glad you came, she said. I didn't know if I should, I admitted. Part of me thought maybe it would be easier not to. She nodded, eyes glinting with quiet understanding. Easier, maybe. But not right. That's when I realized, even in the end, she was still teaching me what honesty looked like. We started walking slowly toward the platform. The sound of the trains echoed through the open air, rhythmic and distant. Our shoulders brushed once, accidentally, and neither of us moved away. That single touch carried more emotion than any word could, a reminder of everything we'd shared, and everything we were about to lose. I keep thinking about all the small things, I said quietly. The mornings. The inside jokes. The way you'd hum when you cooked. I didn't realize how much those moments mattered until they were gone. She looked at me with that half-smile I'd always loved. That's the thing about moments, she said. You don't see them as precious until they're memories. We stopped at the edge of the platform. The train was approaching, a low hum in the distance, building softly like a heartbeat. I felt an ache in my chest, a pull to reach for her, to ask her to stay. But I didn't. Instead, she turned to me, eyes shining in the fading light. Thank you, she whispered. For trying. For loving me the best way you knew how. Her words broke something in me, gently, like glass finally settling after a long crack. I swallowed hard. You made me better, I said. Even if it took losing you to see it. She stepped forward then, closing the space between us. Her hands came up to my face, light, trembling, and she kissed my cheek, her lips warm and lingering. Goodbye, she breathed. The train pulled in, and she turned away, boarding without looking back. I stood there until the sound faded, until all that was left was the wind and the faint hum of the city. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but maybe it was the one we both needed, quiet, kind, complete. Because sometimes love doesn't die. It just finds a softer place to rest. 'Tis strange how quiet life becomes after a goodbye. The first few days felt hollow, the kind of silence that echoed even through noise. Every song, every scent, Every street corner carried her shadow. But slowly, something began to shift. The silence didn't hurt as much. It started to sound like space, room to breathe again. Weeks passed. The leaves that had fallen when we said goodbye were gone now, replaced by the pale stillness of winter. I started walking in the mornings,